Everyone, I'm Berl Schwartz from City Pulse, and I'm very pleased to be here to bring you today, rather, the incoming president of Lansing Community College, who is currently president for a month or so longer at the Owens Community College in Perrysburg, near my hometown of Toledo. So it's with double pleasure that I introduce to you Dr. Steve Martin.
Steve Robinson, you just
I'm
gave
sorry.
me the
Steve Martin, I'm going to expect you to play the banjo or something.
Yeah, well, I do play the banjo, not as well as Steve Martin, but thanks very much. I didn't realize you were from Toledo, bro.
Yes, I started at the Blade and grew up in Toledo and a drugstore family there. So
phenomenal. Well, I've enjoyed my time in Toledo, and sad to leave, but it's outweighed by my real excitement to be coming back to Lansing.
Well, indeed, I wanted to ask you about that because I know that you told the trustees in one of your meetings that it feels like coming home for me.
That's right.
Tell us about that. Why do you feel that way?
Well, I moved to Lansing at age 18 to attend Michigan State, and I ended up staying there for a long time. I earned 3 degrees from Michigan State and lived in Greater Lansing for about 12 years. And LCC is where my community college career started. Halfway through my master's degree in English, I tagged along with someone who was teaching at LCC and just fell in love with community college teaching, changed the emphasis of my master's degree. My very first experience was as an intern teaching freshman composition at LCC. And that experience changed my life. I mean, I have been dedicated to community college education ever since. My first full-time teaching job was down the road at Mott Community College in Flint, Michigan. But I continued to live in Lansing for the first several years of my career at Mott. And I worked in town for many years at Elderly Instruments, just down the street from LCC. And so I have a lot of fond memories of living in Lansing. I'm very excited to be coming back to the community, living downtown, and working on this important community college mission in a community that I really love.
And tell me why, what prompted you to fall in love with community colleges?
Well, it was actually the diversity of the educational setting. I'll tell you a quick story. I mean, I grew up in suburban Detroit. My mom lived in the suburbs. My dad lived downtown, and I went to, a suburban Detroit high school, and then I went to Michigan State and had great educational experiences, but they were kind of homogenous experiences. A lot of students who had the same background that I did. And when I first entered a community college classroom, what hit me was the great diversity of ages. There were students who were older than my parents, students who were younger than me as the instructor. There were students from every socioeconomic walk of life, diversity in terms of race. And I just fell in love with the exciting energy in the classroom. For me, I spent 15 years teaching at a community college. And the varied experiences of my students really helped me grow as a person. I just found it very interesting. So I left that classroom that night and went back to Morrill Hall at Michigan State and said, I know what I want to do. It was really one of these light bulb moments. And I still have it on the wall. I've got a master's degree in community college teaching from Michigan State. And it was the great relationship between LCC and MSU that launched my career. So it's been my professional passion ever since.
It's not unheard of for college presidents to teach while they run a university or as college. What about you? Will you teach?
Well, I would love to. I don't think I'll have the space or the bandwidth on the front end of my new presidency at LCC, but I would love to in the future. Here's a short story about that. I spent so much time in the classroom as a faculty member. It took me about 5 years into my administrative career to start teaching. I taught for many years at University of Michigan Flint in the graduate program in English. And then when I made the transition to come to Toledo, to Owens Community College, I taught that class one more time, and it really knocked me out. I mean, it was a lot of work. So I aspire to get to a place where I could do some teaching either at the graduate level or maybe in my discipline of English at LCC. but there are a number of pressing challenges that I think require my full attention before I jump back into the classroom. I'll just have to get my fix from talking to students and talking to our great faculty on the front end of my time at LCC.
Well, you mentioned pressing issues. What are the priorities that you're facing?
Well, and I'm kind of thinking about this along two parallel tracks because I'm still president here at Owens in Northwest Ohio, and we are challenged in many of the same ways that LCC is. So primarily there is resources as related to the pressures of COVID and the coronavirus pandemic. And this is a national issue, as you know, in higher education. The impact on the economy has driven down tax revenues in every state. Every state is feeling downward pressure on those revenues. Here in Ohio, we're looking at probably a 20% reduction in state appropriations to community colleges. We were able to put together, a respectable budget for fiscal year 21 here. And I've been talking to the team at Lansing who's been doing the same thing. But these kinds of resource challenges are very difficult for public two-year colleges. So that's thing number one. And then the other piece that every higher education organization is working on is how to safely get back to face-to-face instruction given the public health crisis with COVID. It's a challenge for everyone, even for community colleges that don't have residence life.
Let's talk about the budget first then. The fiscal year begins July 1st. You will come in after that, but I gather that this is a budget that's going to remain in flux this summer. Is that correct?
Yes, that's my understanding, and I have to preface everything I'm saying that I'm not currently meeting daily with the team at LCC. I'm plugged in. I attend all the public meetings. And I'm studying all the budget documents and I'm read in. But yes, the current team and my conversations with Dr. Knight and the excellent executive team at LCC is that we anticipate having to do some amended budgets in the early part of the fiscal year. And I'm also consuming all Lansing and Michigan media right now, and it looks like some of the budget construction in Lansing with state government might be pushed out a little bit in terms of putting together a budget because there's just so much volatility and uncertainty.
Well, and the legislature, I believe, is about to go on a summer recess. So whatever is going to happen probably isn't going to happen until after Labor Day. Right. Well, let me touch on one budget issue that has arisen in the last few days, because I think you might have a special interest in this one, which is whether the college radio station, WLNZ-FM, should stay at LCC. President Knight has promised that it will not go dark. Of course, his time runs out at the end of June. What are your thoughts on the future of that radio station?
Well, you're right that I have a special interest in it. I think you might be referring to the fact that I've been a real proponent of college radio. I'm very involved with our Owens internet radio station. I spend a lot of time with our students who are broadcast media technology folk. I even have a program on Owens Community College Radio.
And I believe, if I may interrupt, I think you and I share, I have a show on the impact at Michigan State. Someone told me you worked on the impact.
I did. So at the end of undergraduate and through my master's degree, I had a 3-hour program on Impact Radio called Crossroads of Africa. It was the Sunday morning stint before the reggae sunsplash. And so I did 3 hours of African music, culture, and news. I had a great time on Impact. It really helped me grow. I loved my time on 89 FM. And in fact, my very first interview was with a student journalist at Impact Radio. That was kind of special. But those experiences make me keenly interested in what happens with our radio station. And I'm not a cop-out to say that I'm very involved. I will be very involved, but I don't have all the information that I would need to get involved. I need to study the business model of our radio station. I'm out of range. I can't pick it up here in Toledo. I will be a listener. But my initial thoughts are, I was really very heartened by the fact that you and other community members are interested and concerned about the future of the station. I thought the article in your paper about it was very encouraging. When I see people develop a grassroots kind of approach to a pressing issue like that, I see a lot of opportunities and promise. The only other thought I have is, it seems to me that a solution going forward will have to involve some kind of creative and innovative partnership discussions. Apart from that, I don't have a lot except for a big curiosity and a willingness to dive right in and get involved, because I love radio. Radio has been important to me my entire life.
I have to ask about why you did a 3-hour-a-week show on Africa.
Well, it was primarily driven by my interest in African pop music. When I was at MSU, I had a lot of friends and teachers actually who were in ag or engineering from different countries in Africa. I played in a few bands that had kind of a world music focus. And we're talking about the late 80s, early 90s. There was a real push toward kind of international dance music and pop music. Believe it or not, a lot of African pop acts came through East Lansing and Ann Arbor and Detroit. And when I worked at Elderly Instruments, this was before the internet, Elderly was a bookstore and a record store, still is. And that was where you could go to find interesting, off the beaten path cultural music. And so I still am friends with a lot of folks who are regular listeners to my program, and I had a lot of fun with it. And I would read stories off the AP wire from African countries, and had students on bring their own music, and it was a lot of fun.
We share something of a time slot. My show is only a half hour, but it is on Sunday mornings.
Well, so was the student journalist who interviewed me. Her program is on Sunday morning.
Yes,
it was a good shift. I was always alone. Right. I was always alone in the studio.
Yeah, there are pluses and minuses to that.
Right.
But, and as long as we're talking music, how did your interest in banjo playing come about?
Oh, that's all Elderly. Okay, so when I worked at Elderly, I was playing in sort of a R&B rock band, and Elderly is a great place to work if you're a musician. And I hope folks in Lansing realize what a gem Elderly Instruments is. I mean, it's one of the top 3 fretted instrument stores in the world, actually. And so I worked in the catalog department, but if you are going to get into old-time fiddle music, banjos, mandolins, there's no better place in the country. And so I had friends who played the banjo. I taught myself to play the banjo on my lunch breaks upstairs at Elderly. And I just love the banjo. It's a uniquely American instrument. And I love old-time string band music. And so I played in Lansing for about 8 years in a string band that had a weekly gig at the Travelers Club.
Oh, wow. I remember the Travelers Club.
I have fond memories of the Travelers Club International Restaurant and Tuba Museum.
That's right. One of the things I know, you said you were going to have a tour of the Herman House, which is where President Knight has lived ever since he led its restoration.
Right.
Are you going to live there?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I am. And I'm very excited about that.
And are you married? Do you have children?
Yeah. So here's my situation. So I'm married and I have 2 kids. My wife is the Human Resources Director at the Toledo Museum of Art.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know it well, phenomenal museum. My son, who is 18, will be a freshman at Michigan State down the road. And my daughter will be a senior in high school. And I already pulled her out of one school to go to another. So she's going to stay put in Toledo to finish her senior year with my wife, Catherine. So I'm going to be at Herman House by myself for the first 9 months.
You're going to have a lot of space.
Yes, but here's the thing. When I moved to Toledo to take my position here, I did about 6 months by myself ahead of the family. And in a new position like that, it really does help because you have to immediately throw yourself into the work. And, the important cool thing about leading a community college is you have to, one of the great things you need to do is get plugged into the community. So I have a lot of work, a lot of people to meet, a lot of groups to join and visit. And I can do that a little better by myself. I'll see my family, but I'm going to be so very focused on getting involved downtown, living downtown, and getting to know the community again.
Well, you follow a hard act when it comes to improving LCC's section of downtown. I live a block away from LCC, and it's really incredible to see Dr. Knight out and about on anything near the campus. It's really been quite a pleasure living in LCC's neighborhood since he took charge.
Well, that's great. Well, I look forward to being your neighbor.
Yes.
And you're exactly right about Dr. Knight's transforming the downtown campus. He's obviously done a lot more than facilities. I've spent a lot of time with Dr. Knight over the last few weeks, and will continue to. But the campus is absolutely transformed since when I was an intern in the Arts and Science building in the early 90s. I love college campuses. I love community college campuses. I visit them all over the country. I was one of the site visitors on the prestigious Aspen Prize and did some site visits, seeing community college campuses all over the place. I would hold our downtown campus up against any. With the public art and the way the space flows, and Dr. Knight is justifiably proud of that. And I'm going to be very proud to live on that campus. And yeah, you're going to see me around in the same way that you see Dr. Knight. But he certainly has done amazing things, and I'm very honored to be taking over at a time where I think he has the campus really looking phenomenal. And I know that's a team effort too. There are a lot of great people at Lansing who make that happen.
Well, let's get back, if we could, to the budget. Obviously, as you've talked about, what the legislature does, it will be critical. But you're also facing, I would assume, an uncertain return as far as student population and hence tuition. Any sense yet of how that will shape up?
Yeah, well, LCC has an excellent institutional research function, and I get all the enrollment projection reports, and we obviously do that here at Owens because enrollment really is a lifeblood for a community college. In Michigan, community colleges have three sources of revenue: student tuition and fees, state appropriations, and local property tax revenues. And at least two of those funding sources are subject to a great deal of volatility going forward with the economic crisis and with COVID. Here's what we know is, looking back to the Great Recession, we in the community college world have talked about the counter-cyclical relationship of enrollment to the state of the economy. So when the economy is performing poorly, usually enrollment at two-year colleges increases. I don't know that that is going to hold up in this incredibly disruptive time of coronavirus. We probably will see some programs go up in enrollment, but I think we can expect some real volatility going forward. And so the colleges that are nimble and innovative are the ones who are going to be able to adapt to that. There are 28 community colleges in Michigan. And I think Lansing is poised to weather this storm through resilience and a lot of great planning. But you're right. It's going to be a challenge, and it's challenged by things that could turn on a dime. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the various plans of Michigan universities. University of Michigan just came out yesterday with its plan to return to campus, and institutions are going to have to be able to change quickly if the public health situation changes quickly.
Well, and we've just seen in the last 24 hours, 18 students, 18 young people, half of whom are connected to Michigan State University, being
Right.
diagnosed with the coronavirus. I would think that one of the serious concerns you have to deal with is these are young people who are fearless, and how do you keep them safe on a campus?
Well, and that's one of the things that you see in the higher ed press is you can make all the great plans and do all the measuring and social distancing and buy all the plexiglass in the world. But if you don't work the cultural side of the problem of what students will do on their own, that's huge. Now, one of the things that's a little different at a non-residential community college is that you don't have the congregant living situation that you would have at Michigan State. And you also don't have some of the large auxiliary gatherings like, filling the Breslin Center or Spartan Stadium with people and having sort of super spreader events. What's interesting is I've been really impressed with the return to campus plans that the team at LCC has put together. Because I've had to be very involved with that work, here in Northwest Ohio. We have, I think, a really good restart plan for Owens. The team at LCC has put together a very thoughtful and in many ways conservative plan for bringing students back. It's primarily an online semester in the fall with some notable exceptions. And I think that's prudent. So that's where we are at LCC. And that's the great work of the team that's already been thinking hard about this.
What are some trends you are beginning to perceive in community college education as a result, first of all, of the pandemic?
Mm-hmm.
But secondly, we're all, every level of society is dealing with serious questions about race now.
Correct.
And I'd be interested in whether you see some changes in the next 10 years or so as a result of both.
I do, and the two issues you bring up have an interesting confluence because when I actually published an article in the Community College Daily at the beginning of the pandemic with sort of 5 issues for community college leaders to watch. And the first one was the equity impact of our mitigation efforts. So let me talk about that for a minute. In community colleges, we know that our student outcomes are not equal across the board. We know that students of color, students from low socioeconomic backgrounds are not retained and do not complete at the same rate. And good community colleges, including Lansing Community College, have been working on this equity issue for some time because frankly, it's just not an acceptable outcome. Community colleges exist to provide educational opportunities, and if those opportunities aren't realized at the same rate among demographic groups of students, we're not doing what we're supposed to do. So community colleges were working on equity issues before the pandemic. But this pandemic and our mitigation efforts to go online have exacerbated some of these things. For example, there is still in our country a digital divide. Not everybody has fast internet at home. Here at Owens Community College, we left our libraries open throughout the pandemic so that students could come and have fast broadband access. We loaned out laptop computers. We loaned out hotspots to students. We kept our food pantry open because there is homelessness and food insecurity among our students. So, to your question, going forward, I think the pandemic accelerates our need to focus on equitable student outcomes. And let me pivot to recent actions by the LCC board that really impressed me. Not the last meeting, but the meeting before, the trustees adopted a very thoughtful resolution on racial injustice. And what I love about that document is it's not just a posture or a position. Built into it is some action. And I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it, but one of my first tasks, in fact, one of my first formal assignments is to assemble a team that works on an equity action plan and has specific steps that are that are enacted, not just words, but the things that we do to address, what we're seeing with systemic racism and the disparate outcomes in our community. Community colleges are this great democratizing force in our country. It's why I love community colleges. And so I think that will be a huge issue for community colleges going forward.
Well, unfortunately, we're just about out of time.
Okay.
And while I accidentally called you Steve Martin earlier, we wouldn't have found out about your banjo playing.
That's how we find out things.
Exactly. So, but I wish you well. I look forward to meeting you in person, and good luck at Lansing Community College.
Well, thank you. At least I know one neighbor. So if I need to borrow a cup of sugar,
you can come by and get the tomatoes out of our front yard.
That sounds great. Well, look, thank you for your time. And I look forward to seeing you on campus and downtown.
Dr. Steve Robinson, thanks so much for being on City Pulse. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. Take care.